Well, our guest this morning is Michael Spies, or Speesy. Welcome to you, and a career that spans skiffs, ocean racing, Sydney Hobart races, Hamilton Island races, almost around the world. So welcome to you.
Thank you.
Hunters Hill and Lane Cove, that's where it all began for you. Talk us about your early days and growing up.
Probably even preceding that. In the early days we were living above the funeral parlour, and my father got back into sailing after a stint in motor racing, sailing moths, and then he got a heron, and I started crewing with him when I think I was 3.5 or 4. Then we did move to the Lane Cove River there, sailing with him out of Balmoral every Sunday, and sailing, crewing in Sabots out of Hunters Hill and Lane Cove on the other days of the weekend. So yeah.
So basically you began in the Heron, then the Sabo, and then graduated from there to where?
We were quite competitive in the Herons. The Heron was a huge sort of class in those days, 100 plus boats there. When we were state champions, we were always top 3-ish in the nationals, and we were going all around the country. We went overseas. We won the Inter-Dominions in 67. And then in 68, we actually progressed to the NS14s, the Northbridge Seniors. But in the meantime, like while I was sailing with my father on the Sundays, my father was sailing either moths and then into fins on the Saturday. So it was the whole regime of the family was totally, sailing focused.
And with the North Shore 14 with your dad there?
The NS14s, yes, but we were too light, and we were competitive again. We're top 3 or 4, but just the people we're surrounded with, then the Frank Bethwaite's, the Julian Bethwaite's, the Mark Bethwaite's. We were always, and Bethwaite's were making a lot of gear for us, and bits and pieces. It was quite a technical thing. Even when I was very young, I was quite interested in the technical side of things.
So obviously a good grounding with, racing against those guys and in big competitive fleets. So where did you go after that, as far as your skiff sailing was concerned?
Well, probably my big break, my parents got separated, and they were both living at Hunters Hill, one on the Parramatta River, one on the Lane Cove River. I moved in with my father, and we'd gone into flying 11s. And the bay we lived in, we had champion sailors there. We lived next to Dave Porter of KB fame. Next to him was the Rays, Margaret Ray, which was Ian Perdrier's wife. Then we had Michael Coxon there, and we just all board up there. We're all around Hunters Hill Sailing
Top
Club.
skiff sailors, yeah.
All good sailors, and Michael Cocko was sailing their flying 11s on top of the game there, and we were just sort of one peg below him, a couple of years younger. But
were you steering then?
Yeah, always steered. And we'd been successful in the Sabots. We'd won a couple of states in the Sabots, so we were always reasonably competitive with reasonably good equipment. We're always working on equipment. I'd always work in school holidays. That was the deal. I'd have to work in school holidays to forward a new sail or contribute to it, and it was quite a disciplined but well-programmed thing. I used to go into Elstrom Sales in the school holidays and work there and cut out numbers.
With Mike Fletcher? With
Fletcher, and McDiamond was there in those days, and Bruce Hewish, and there was a lot of, it was a good thing to do. And
a great grounding for you.
Yeah. Very good, and it gave you the background, of what went on, and then I tried to diversify every school holidays and work somewhere different, like in a chandlery. Other sail makers, I mentioned Bruce Hewish, Freshwater Sails, who was the gun in skiff sails in those days. And
you'd learn a bit about life as well with Hewish.
You would, yes.
That's for another day, I think. Another day. Yes.
But no, it was a good grounding, and then out of the 11s, I never won a title in the 11s. We were always just on the podium or just off it, but winning into club races. But
a good training boat. They still are, aren't they?
Brilliant.
11s.
Brilliant.
Terrific little boat.
I just think the Australian training boats that we have compared to the European boats, that's why we produce so many great sailors. Really, I mean they're just just good solid boats. So far ahead of their time.
Yeah. So from the flying 11s, we took a step up.
Well, we were racing the Sabots on the Saturday. The 11s on the Saturday at Hunters Hill, and then I'd hang around Hunters Hill Sailing Club trying to get a ride on a 12-foot skiff. Someone didn't turn up on a Sunday, and I was hanging around, and I used to get an occasional ride with a guy called Peter Cowie. He'd lost his arm in an accident, and he was sailing a 3-hand at 12, and then I used to jump on him with another guy called Duncan Rutherford, who went on to be a champion skiff sailor as well, and fill in there. And then out of the blue that winter, we were going to build a new Flying 11, and I got a call, and this is probably the biggest turning point, from a guy called Phil Stevenson. He'd seen me hanging around the club and said, would you like to do a 12-foot skiff program I'm building a new boat. And he'd pioneered the stitch and glue concept, the boat's brilliant man, still is, and we're still very good friends to this day. And so I'm only 14 at this stage, and to make the Inter-Dominion in those days, there were 80 odd boats, 90 odd boats, guys building new boats, and wouldn't even get a look in of representing Australia. So we weren't that good at Hunters Hill Club, which was a strong club for 12-foot skiffs. Michael Coxon moved to the 12s, and he was dominating there, but we had the state titles, which I think your late father Lionel used to start. And a huge event, rig up Clifton Gardens, and they're not exaggerating, 70 or 80 boats there. And I think we qualified 4th or 5th, and I was the youngest guy ever to have qualified for the Australian Inter-Dominion team. And
they took the top 12, didn't they? 12
yeah,
boats, yeah.
2 Queensland boats,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the Queensland boats might have just come in after your time in the class. But huge accolade just to make it. Like CYCA didn't make the team that year, for instance. Certainly made up for later years. We went and and then we're racing. I met a guy called Ian Murray. It was his first season in the 12s. Warwick Brooklyn was sailing with Mark Anderson. There was a great camaraderie there. The gunboat at the time, a brand new farboat, AWA John Levy, he dominated the States, but coming to Dominion, we did a lot of work on the rigs. We built the first square top mainsail ever seen in a skiff. Steve-O was just, Phil Stevenson, he was just so innovative.
Yeah.
I tell people this and they just laugh. Like, our second rig was a stainless steel mast, and he had no money. Well, he was making his own sails. He built the boat. I used to get the train out to Riverwood where he lived with his parents, and just the workmanship and what he did, and plus he was designing other boats for other people in the fleet and selling plans. So the guy was just an absolute genius and highly, highly underrated. Like, Bruce Farr had come through that regime, and I mean, he was more innovative than Farr. I know that's a pretty wild thing to say, but that to me was what I learned in that year really, really stood me good. And we actually got 3rd on points in the Inter-Dominion, 3rd overall, but we'd retired from a race because there was pressure on us before protest. Steve-O, being the sportsman he was a marginal cross, I think, and we finished up either 4th or 5th, and Ian got 3rd, and then Ian went on to greater things. And so that was probably the big turning point. I was very, very young, and being surrounded by these guys, these adults, and sailing with them, and
good people too, good sailors and innovative, and as you say.
Well, and if you couldn't make it yourself, your neighbour could. I mean, it wasn't like you're down the Chandlery and buying things or going to fabricators. No one had any money, and it was great. It was a really good learning, something that stayed with me for a long time.
So did you stay with Steve-O for long, or?
No, he then went back to his other career. I did other 12-foot skiff things, and I was in and out of the 12s there. But in the background of what happened, my father had bought a half-tonner. He was doing Tempest Olympic program, and he was off overseas, and he convinced the stepmother that it'd be a good idea to get a family boat, and we're looking at a Columba 34. And I remember he dragged me aside. He said, I'm just doing this to keep Maureen, my stepmother, happy. He said, we'll get a race boat, don't worry.
Columbia 34 is hardly a race boat.
So we finished up with a little Triton 28.
Right.
Which happened to fit the half-ton rule, very small for half-ton, and he campaigned that, and we were rating under the half-ton limit. And then we put a bigger rig in it, and he went off overseas, and he left me the half-tonner, so I'm still at school. My school's on the water, and he's overseas, and he said, you better go and stay with your auntie. Well, I did cut a deal with her. She was getting the meal money from my father, and I'm living on the boat at school, tied up to the rowing pontoon. And we're doing the CYC Winter Series. And once again, I'm 15, I think, at this stage, 1974, 75. And And we're campaigning, and all my crew members are my schoolmates, except one who used to be at a school up the road at Lane Cove and used to ride his bike down, and we used to go on Lane Cove River and train. And we started off, and this is the day where they were all production half-tonners, Currong 30s, East Coast 31s, and we were further back than fullback. We were hopeless, you know, we're making mistakes and wine glass and all that. But we got to the stage where we got really, really quite good. I'm talking 30 half-tonners on the start line, mixed fleet with the quarter-tonners there, which was about 15. Huey Trainer just launched CYCA Mukau and lining up there, and hectic starts, scratch starts, and they did have a handicap thing at the finish. Really good sailors.
So this was your real first introduction to the CYC, I guess, and those winter racing,
absolutely. You know, I had done the level rating regattas as a crew member on the half-tonner. But, you know, to his credit, my father was quite liberal thinking. He said, well, you know, you're competent, and we used to take the boat away in school holidays. And I remember there was a good sailor here called Greg Gilliam, Groggo, and my dad phoned me and I said, look, can you take the boys up to Pittwater so they don't put the thing on the bricks on the way up? And I remember Groggo phoning my dad and said, mate, those guys don't need help. He said, they're great. He said, and that really sowed the seeds. And getting back to the half-tonner, we got very, very, very quite good. You know, we were top threes and fours, and every lunchtime at school with programmed periods, we're out on the Lane Cove River practising jibing bloopers, you know, reading. Bobby Ross used to publish a thing called Windward Magazine and Windward Newsletter and tell you how to peel the spinnaker. So we've got the latest Windward Magazine, how would we peel the spinnaker? And we actually got quite competitive, and a lot of guys helped us. You know, Billy Radcliffe had a boat here, the Hankins boat, Fuzzy Duck, Graham Aborn, Hot Bubbles. A lot of guys actually took us under their wing and thought what we would, you know, there's no youth academy in those days. You had to create your own gigs. And but, you know, if I look back, we won a race. It was a highlight. It was huge. It was absolutely huge. You know, beating all these other production half-tonners, and you know, it's a pity that whole. Then it became an arms race because the Worlds were here 2 years later, and we're all of a sudden finishing up in far boats and all these beautiful competitive cruiser racer that had parity were basically obsoleted to, you know, twilight boats basically.
So I guess you saw in that time, being introduced to the club, all the famous ocean racing boats here at the
Well, even going backwards a step, I probably missed a chapter there, and I did the Sabots titles in Hobart in 1970-71, and we got second in the Sabots titles. And I'm down in Hobart, and my father was down there when we used to watch the boat come in. I remember Buccaneer got line on us that year, and Pasha won it overall. I'm just in awe. You know, I couldn't get off the water quick enough with my Sabo, and I just used to stand there, and my dad used to go, we've got to go. I know. I said, I'm just happy here. And I found, you know, and I vowed then that that's what I wanted to do. You know, and we're fortunate enough to live on the water, and I had my rowboat and I had a little tinny and all that. And there was a boat in our bay called Carousel, a Tasman seabird. And even as a young age, I just used to row around and just look at that thing in absolute awe. And I remember it's funny how little things stick in mind. I remember it was owned by a guy called Milton Brakel.
Brakel, that's him. Yeah.
And he had his own slipway a few doors around from us. And I remember he said, I'm rowing there, and he was putting on a brand new prototype set of Barlow chrome winches, and they just sparkling. I just thought, and they were huge. You know, now you look at them and you think, oh yeah. But I just used to row around that boat for hours, just sitting in there looking at it in absolute awe. And yeah, so going back to that, I knew what I wanted to do. You know, that's me, and that's, you know, I set my goals there, and then I'd go training in my Sabo, and I'd sail my Sabo here and tied up out the front of there, have my little pocket money and just walk, you know, help guys fold sails in the park and all that. And then just regressing a little bit, when we got the half-tonner, Gordon Marshall, the late Gordon Marshall, good friend of both of ours, came and measured the boat. And Gordon took a shine to me and sort of took me under his wing, and if I was around, I'd be holding tapes for him, measuring and all that. And, you know, he was a very, very solid and guiding mentor to me. But yes, you're right, I met a lot of guys, including yourself, hanging around here just looking for a ride. Like, to get a ride in those days was impossible. Like, no one wanted to know about young guys. Now there's a transition here, but you you know, I remember sailing on, having to get rides on Endeavour 24s in joggy races, Stardust, Buster Rickard, you know, and overnight, you know, you just look back and you think, what were you doing out there?
Yeah. Well, so then how did you get involved fully into ocean racing?
Well, probably from the half-tonner, you know, we had some credibility, and guys just didn't take young guys on their boats anymore. And as I said, you know, we had a lot of support. Merv Davey, you know, I didn't know who Merv Davey was. So he said, what you guys are doing out there is unbelievably good, you know, and because we're 15 years old. And, you know, and as I said, guys like Billy Radcliffe and that, and I was sort of hanging around here just trying to get anything I could. And then I think my first real big break came on a sail with you guys on Frizzle. Graham Freeman asked me to do Montague on Natal, and I was shot on the foredeck. We had some really good guys, and we won that race, and it really, you know, I was hoping to get a Hobart ride before that, and I didn't, and you were trying to help me out. I actually sailed back on Love and War, and I did a lot of the lead-up races on Love and War and then post-Hobart, because I didn't quite pass muster to get a ride. And then it went from there, and then I did my first Hobart on a boat called, we were actually at the presentation for up at RPA for the Montague Island race, which we won. And Tony Pearson said, look, I've just launched a new 1-tonner, would you like to come and sail with us? And that was my first Hobart, where we had some pretty big names on that boat. You know, Sidney Hammond was navigating.
Cole Betts was on board?
Jimmy, I sailed with Cole the next year on Ragamuffin. Jimmy Burke. Tony was a very, very good campaigner. Pete Cavell was there. Just trying to think who else, but it was a...
So that was the first of your 46 races to Hobart?
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and wasn't a good result. Piccolo won that year. We didn't do a particularly good job. The boat was a Lidgard design and was probably a little bit out of balance. It was probably a bit too much in one corner. The sail program wasn't...
So from there, where did we go as far as ocean racing was concerned? You were still...
Well, I was still in and out of skiffs.
Yeah.
You know, doing skiffs, and it made it a little bit hard to commit to a full season down here and all the long races. But then I got a call from Sid. The boats had come back from the Admiral's Cup, and Sid said, do you want to be my forward hand on Ragamuffin? And I said yes. And that was the 77 Hobart, 77 Hobart, where Kurloa won, we were second. We only had to average 3.5 knots or something, 4 knots maybe from Tasman to win the race. And that was a really, really hard race. I remember Sid, I was on Sid's watch, and Sid said, I've always dreaded this. He said, every other year in a blow we've always had an east-south-west. He said, this is a dead muzzler. But I just think back, you know, great seamen we had. I think Billy Lawler was navigating that year, Cole Betts, Dickie Norman. You know, I was fortunate enough to have some really, really good mentors, earmarking me for, you know, seamanship. You know, even though I think back, you know, compared to what we do now, you know, they talk about the good old days. Well, these are the good old days in terms of safety. I mean, you know, I don't even think I put a harness on that boat. And I was changing storm jibs, no life jackets. You know, I mean, you just wouldn't even contemplate doing that now. But that's how things were done in those days.
But you mentioned the skiff program. I mean, the 18-footers then were part of your life.
Yeah, I got into those pretty early. We'd finished our HSC, and
how'd you go in that? Topped in sailing? Was that a course?
Topped in sailing, yes. Yeah. No, I was actually used to do the barest amount to get away with it and get a good result.
Right.
Yeah, sort of looking over people's shoulders when you're doing the test.
Sorry to digress.
No, we came through all right, and but never was sort of earmarked to want to do the university bit, although I did do a bit of post-tertiary stuff. So we did a HSC, and then we bought a 12-foot skiff. My best friend then, David Hodson, myself, we bought one of Rookland's old boats, dragged it out, hadn't been sailed for a couple of years, and we qualified again, went to New Zealand, and went for the Indominions again, weren't too good over there. We were great in the States, and we had a few breakages over there. I think we dropped the rig by memory. And then got back
Maybe
here.
some early nights too, over there.
Yeah, very early nights. Yeah. And we got to, I got back and I got a call from a guy called Nicky Masterman and said, do you want to come and do the 18 Nationals with us up in Britain? He had a boat called Knockin' Kirby's, which was a wooden far boat in the second season. It wasn't a bad program. And I jumped on the 18, did some club racing out of the league on the lead up, and I was basically, I think I had over the years 16 or 17 years in the 18s, and that was the start of it. And then we went again next year, the three of us, Johnny Dean, Nicky Masterman and myself, in no particular order. We built a new Colmar boat. Nick was working for Fletcher Elstrom's. I was involved in the construction, had those two left hands of mine working pretty well, and learned a lot about that. But we missed the team. We missed the world team. They only took 8 boats, and we missed out. I think we were number 9. We came good at the end of the year. Learned a lot again, and basically in and out of the 18s. Did a sail with Woody in Perth, where we got second to Ian Murray. In and out of there, and then.
But ultimately, you won the big prize, didn't you? The JJ's twice, is that right?
Yeah, won the JJ Giltinans in 93 and 95. Took a fair while to get there. Had a plan in my own head. We were quite innovative. I was sort of involved in I saw how they did things in motor racing, preparation, presentation, and all that, and I tried to adapt that to our philosophy. Our trailers were always painted, everything was polished, everything was properly presented, we were properly presented. Reliability, we wouldn't, not necessarily always the fastest, but we were probably the most organised.
Yeah, but like in anything, well prepared. That really counts for everything.
Yeah, and presented and aware that you're ambassadors to your sponsors, and I'd like to think we sort of moved a lot of that to a sustainable level, with presentation that, we were just so much more organised in the park. Our boat would always roll over the same way because all the pins were facing the same way, just attention to detail. And I was fortunate enough that we had towards the end, not when we restarted that program, we had no money, but towards the end we had reasonable money, and I could actually sustain a sustainable wage out of it and just focus on that, and it was a year-round job, like we finished the season and I wasn't doing much overseas at that stage. You might try to get away for a holiday and go and do Hamilton Island or something like that, but we'd be building next year's boat straight away, and we're always first in the water, and we're always dominant the first part of the season, and people would catch up to us, but we did a reasonably good job with that.